in the same way that we sort of intrinsically understand our witness testimony, I also, like I started with, I am an eyewitness. I had a personal encounter with the Creator, and I'm going to make a separate recording of that. And there are many people like me who have those one-on-one experiences with the Creator. Many, millions, billions have had those one-on-one experiences with the Creator. And so we know, just like there's life after death, just from eyewitness accounts, we know that there is a Creator, just from eyewitness accounts. So what is the likelihood of 44 people, coming back to that example, what's the likelihood of 44 people across time, across millennia, contriving to make up a story about one specific deity and the whole story that comes from it? The likelihood is almost zero that they contrive together, which means the likelihood is almost 100% that the story is true. So we have to start thinking about then, if the likelihood that the Bible story is true, we have to start considering the content of the Bible. And we have to also just consider the likelihood. What is the likelihood that one single human, currently there's 8 billion people on the planet. Okay, that's excluding all the billions that have already come before us and the many millions that are still going to come after us. So we just take a snapshot, 8 billion people on the planet at the moment. What's the likelihood that one of those 8 billion could fulfill specific part of the biblical narrative and fulfill very specific parts of the biblical narrative? What's the probability? Well, it's 1 in 8 billion. But it's very simple maths. It's a very low probability, that one human can set out on their own to go and accomplish all these things. Yet, we have a biblical narrative that tells us one human did accomplish very specific things. It is odd. Come on, it's odd. I believe this narrative, alright? But I'm just putting myself in your shoes for a moment. I can understand. The story is a bit strange. This guy, Jesus, born of a virgin, in other words, a woman who was a virgin. No intimacy with any man. Okay. Born in a human body. Okay. Raised in a specific culture. Okay. We'll probably get to at some point. And then so now he doesn't get to choose where he's born, what town he's born in. But he's born in the right town, according to the biblical narrative. He doesn't get to choose which town he escapes to, which country he escapes to. His parents, his earthly parents, decided that, not him. Yet, he fulfills that part of the biblical narrative. Escapes to Egypt. When he comes back to his land and his culture that he was born into, the Jews, into Israel. Again, too young to choose which town he comes back to. His earthly parents decided that. But he fulfills the biblical narrative. He comes back to that town. How can a newborn decide all of this stuff? How can a newborn decide to be born to a virgin? None of us decided when, how, we were going to be conceived and when. None of us. That choice is beyond humanity. That's outside of our time space. That's up to someone else. So right there we understand that there's a design, that there's a creator. It's just too odd to be human created and human contrived. And a lot of people will then debate, no, when he was 30 years old, he was an adult, he could start to target certain biblical narratives. Some would call them prophecies. But, 100%, I think that's valid. That's worth thinking about. I as an adult, I can go read a book and I can go and take actions to line up with that book. Sure, I can make that choice and do that if I chose to, right? But which human adult would purposefully go die by execution on a cross? And if any of you have ever looked at crucifixion as a form of execution, you'll understand that it's possibly one of either the top the worst, or maybe, top 3 worst forms of execution ever devised by humans. And we don't have time to get into sort of the medical aspects of crucifixion. It's terrible. It's a terrible way of dying. Who would willingly choose to go do that just to fulfill a biblical narrative? I don't think a con man wouldn't. The con artist wouldn't, because a con artist by nature is selfish, self-absorbed and self-aware. They would always save their own skin. It's a con artist. Okay. A madman, possibly, someone who's completely crazy, lunatic, might land up there sort of by mistake. But the reality is, if he was mad or a lunatic, people would have seen it beforehand in his conduct. There wouldn't have been a following. Never mind all sorts of miraculous things that happened around this individual. So he couldn't have been a madman, which really then only leaves us with one option. Maybe he was who he said he was. Maybe Jesus actually was who he said he was, the Son of the Most High God. Now, again, if you go back to one of my prologue videos, I think it's the second one. The only religious narrative, if you go look at all religions around the world, the only religious narrative that can accurately and definitively deal with the human problem is the biblical narrative. It's the only one. Why? Humanity cannot deal with their own problem. Why? Because we are already intrinsic to the problem. We are already surrounded by our core problem. And any effort we make is already tainted by the core problem. We need someone else who is not tainted to deal with the core problem, to give us a chance of rescue. Only the biblical narrative has a God-man that deals with humanity's core problem. He takes it to the grave with him. This is fantastic news. You and I do not, oh gosh, this is not the point of the series, but this is such good news. You and I no longer have to deal with sort of the sting of death, the power of death. If we can understand that a God-man outside of our time space, outside of our dimensionality, outside of the tainting of our core problem, came into earth, into a human body, and paid that ultimate price, when we accept that as credible, as valid, as true, as fact, that is the day where we start to escape that core problem for ourselves. And there's only one religious narrative that deals with that effectively. Not all the others try. I mean, yes, we can try and, again, I don't want to get down a rabbit trail. Just go watch that second prologue video. It explains it well. Only the biblical narrative can deal with our core problem, and only Jesus Christ is the reason why. The God-man, the only God-man who ever was and ever will be. And one day he's coming back here. He only comes twice. He's been once. We're waiting for the second time. We are all waiting. The three major religions in the world understand that there is going to be an end to this earth. They all have narratives about a sort of savior, a Messiah coming back. We know it's going to happen, and that's going to be Jesus Christ's second return. And unfortunately, out of those three religious narratives, only one of them is accurate. Again, the biblical narrative.